on that. And so I'm just going to read a verse and then just say a few things about it, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion about this. So this is chapter number 4, text number 40. The chapter is entitled Transcendental Knowledge, and Krishna says, Agyascha Shradadhanascha Samsayatma Vinashyati Nayam Lokos Tinaparo Nasukham Samsayatmanaha. So this is Srila Prabhupada's translation. Ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. Now this is a very, very interesting translation, because what Srila Prabhupada has done in this translation is he's taken three types of people. The agya means the ignorant. The ashradadhana means the faithless. And the samsayatma means the doubter. So what Srila Prabhupada's done in the translation is he's combined them. He says the ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures. So he's collapsed all of them into one. And obviously that makes complete sense because they all are in one sense connected. Interestingly, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary, he says these are three different categories. He says the agya is the ignorant person who doesn't know anything about spiritual life. And he says a little higher than the agya is the ashradadhana, the one who knows about spiritual life but doesn't have the faith to practice spiritual life. And then he says above the ashradadhana is the shamshayatma, the one who knows about spiritual life, the one who's invested some of their faith in spiritual life, but the one who still is constantly doubting even whilst practicing. So Vishwanath, he says there are three categories here. And out of all of them, Vishwanath says that one of them is actually the worst. Out of the ignorant, the faithless, and the doubting, which one do you think is the worst? The doubting. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says actually the doubter is the worst, and the praman, the evidence he says, is because samsayatma is mentioned twice in the verse. So Vishwanath says therefore Krishna is saying this one's the worst. Now you would think that the doubter is the best because they know, they're practicing, but they have doubts. But they must be higher than the other two. But all of you said doubter. Why would you say the doubter is the worst? What's your logic for that? Because he's in the process but still not having taste. Okay, yeah?
Because they already have some knowledge.
Because they have knowledge. If you have knowledge and you're not doing it, it's worse than not doing it. Okay?
It's like you don't belong anywhere, neither here nor there. So you're just hanging in between.
Okay, yes, you're kind of like Arjun says, a riven cloud. You've left material life but can't, experience spiritual life. Yeah, one devotee told me joining Krishna consciousness is like joining the mafia. You can't leave because you know too much. So it's kind of like that. Sometimes once we come to spiritual life, we can't go back to our old life, but at the same time we don't feel like it's the worst. It's like suspended existence. Yeah. Any other reason? Yeah.
It's just more like a question. What's the difference between a doubtful person and a faithless person? Because if you're having doubts, you don't have the faith, and if you don't have the faith, it's because you have doubts.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I guess you could characterize these in different ways. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says faithless means one who has zero faith. In other words, they know, but they don't have the faith to practice. But a doubter is someone who has a certain amount of faith to start the process, but then is constantly doubting on top of that. Does that make sense? Like we would identify with that. We have faith, but we also have a lot of doubts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other takers on why the doubter is the worst? Yeah.
They won't surrender all the way.
They won't surrender all the way, okay, but the other guys won't surrender at all. So why is the doubter worse? Yeah?
He doesn't have an excuse, because the person without knowledge has an excuse. I don't have knowledge, and the faithless has an excuse. But then the doubter, they're having knowledge and then not there is an issue in the application of that knowledge, which is causing doubts.
Okay, so they have less excuse.
Building off of that, there's less like innocence in the like rejection, because the person who doesn't know, they just don't know. But if you know and then still like, I don't trust it, then it's a little more. It's like if you know someone and they ask you for a favor and then you say no, it's a little like, why can't you help me? But if a stranger came, you're like, no, and it's less offensive. But if like you know and then reject, it's more offensive, less
because there's more of a relationship and and then you say no.
Maybe it's something like doing things half-heartedly, so the neither way decide that side, so we're not succeeding in either way.
Yes, okay, true, okay. Last one.
Maybe something also going on from Narottams is when you is rejecting almost knowledge and faith is mercy from Krishna, and so people who have not received that mercy yet, they don't have a choice. But when you have received mercy from Krishna and you are not, acting on it or even receiving it, then it's kind of sort of like maybe that mercy flow you were talking about earlier in the lecture today. Like you haven't accepted.
Srila Prabhupada's, I don't know if he exactly said it like this, but to the effect that if you come to Krishna consciousness, you're fortunate. If you don't come to Krishna consciousness, you're unfortunate. But if you come to Krishna consciousness and don't take full advantage, you're most unfortunate. Because there's a sense in which you got there, but then you're not. Okay, last one.
Just going off confidence, the person who doesn't know, the person who knows but doesn't have faith, has the confidence of not practicing. He has strong confidence in himself and to not practice. But the person who knows and practices doesn't have confidence in either side, so in himself. So
that was a very creative way to try and second guess how confidence relates to the. Thank you. No, that was good. That was really good. Yeah, Vishwanath, he says that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that basically the doubter is so close and yet so far, and that's really agonizing. That someone is right there and then they're not able to take full advantage. Therefore, he says the doubter is the worst. And in that way, like all of us have so many doubts in our life. Sometimes we have doubts in the movement. Sometimes we have doubts in devotees. Sometimes we have doubts in the process. But I found for me, like one of the biggest doubts I had was doubts in myself. Doubt in my own lack of confidence in my own ability, lack of confidence to just kind of go for it in Krishna consciousness. And therefore I realized that this lack of confidence and this constantly doubting myself was always holding me back in my spiritual life. I felt like for so many years there was like an inner critic, which every time I had an idea of what could be done, the inner critic was always holding me back, and therefore holding me back from deeper experiences in Krishna consciousness. And so I thought a lot about confidence and how to overcome those confidence barriers. If I asked you, what do you think are some of the classic signs that we may have low confidence? What are the kind of things that you would observe in your personality which may indicate that we lack confidence in ourselves? Yeah.
A sense of judgment.
Yeah, we're always judging ourselves, we're always seeing where we went wrong or how we did bad, or we're always kind of finding faults in ourselves. Yeah.
Not willing to take responsibility.
Yeah, not willing to take responsibility, a feeling of inadequacy, that I won't be able to do it, someone else can do it better than me.
was gonna say giving up, kind of like that.
Yeah.
Like giving up on an idea that you have.
Yeah, having a dream, but then not just kind of giving up on it without any serious attempt. Yeah.
There's a constant sense of fear, fear of failing, fear of failure, right?
Yeah.
So you're hesitant of doing anything, and you start doubting your own thoughts. So it's a chain where you have fear, and then you start self-doubting, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that things end up going wrong because you never believed in yourself in the first place.
Yes, this is such a big one. Fear of failure. Nelson Mandela once said, "May your decisions reflect your dreams and not your fears." How many times do we make decisions because we're fearful of what may go wrong? My spiritual master once said that to me. He said, the problem with you is you're always getting in anxiety about what could go wrong instead of getting excited about what could go right. And sometimes we're constantly thinking it will go wrong, I won't do it, it won't work out, and therefore I don't even try. So yeah. Just one more thing I'll say on that. You know, like public speaking was also not my thing. The Hare Krishna movement changes you, you know. But what I realize is when you come in front of an audience to speak, actually the difference between a confident person, a confident speaker, and a nervous person, it's just a mindset. Because when everyone comes to speak, there's a certain energy that goes through you, like now I'm going to be in front of a bunch of people. Now I think with that energy, if you're meditating on how you can serve the people and help the people and make an incredible contribution to someone's life, when you get hold of the mic, that energy turns into excitement. But when you've got that energy and you're kind of coming up and you're thinking, and what if I make a mistake? What if I think I'm an idiot? What if I make them, you know, I'm not able to keep them interested? Then it comes across as nervousness. So it's not that people who are confident don't have this energy going through them. It's just that they frame the whole thing in a different way, according to what they're meditating on. Yeah. Sorry, yes.
I was gonna say, kind of having like no thoughts of your own, or like needing that validation from other people. So that's something that stops you, saying until I have the validation of other people that say what you're doing is correct, you kind of stop yourself and say, oh, I don't have that. Maybe I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I shouldn't be the one to be decisive and say, let me make this decision that I think will propel me forward.
Yeah, so constantly seeking that validation before you make a step forward like that. Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a big one. Yeah.
Comparison, you comparing yourself.
Comparison, that's a huge one. Yeah. So you want to say more?
No.
Okay.
I was thinking to your point, one of the symptoms of, of that is that you don't develop deeper personal connections with people, or you don't risk taking, the time to know someone. And I was wondering if that is sort of, but I just think it's brilliant that you brought it up, like having, problems with self-confidence, because I wonder if that's also a reason why we're not willing to develop a personal connection with Krishna as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And developing relationships, and this requires some vulnerability, requires one to be a little open, and sometimes we're not willing to do that. Yeah, that's a really good one. Yes, back. Nice to see you.
I was thinking a symptom of lack of confidence is that in a social situation where people are doing things that go against your principles, you just kind of go with their flow rather than standing up for your principles.
Yeah, so like constantly adjusting to the environments or the opinions or the situation around you instead of staying true to what you believe to be right. Yeah, that's another big one. Yeah.
So we talk about fear of failures, but also holding on to past failures.
Holding on to past failures, constantly remembering how it didn't work out and allowing ourselves to be like limited by that. Yeah. Yeah, we're doing this exercise because, like I would recommend like that you maybe take some time to think about that, like what's holding you back in your confidence. Because from my observation, especially amongst this generation, like there's so much potential, there's so much incredible talent that can be unleashed. There's so many amazing things waiting to happen, but confidence is that ingredient which is sometimes missing. And one thing I wanted to share today is that confidence thrives in a sangha where everyone's empowering each other. If I thought in my life of the times when I was able to do things I would never do, it's because I was amongst devotees and in a sangha in which we created an energy between us where everyone kind of overcame their doubts and empowered each other to achieve amazing things. And like coming here and seeing, the whole setup and all of you, I think that's a great opportunity that all of you have to kind of really create that very, very encouraging and empowering and enthusing and supportive network amongst yourselves where you encourage each other, like, yeah, go for it, and you're always looking at how to invest in each other. Then what will happen is you'll see like miracles will come out, amazing things will be achieved, and that's the power of Sangha. Srila Prabhupada said, your love for me will be shown by how much you cooperate. And if we think about that, that's not just like an organizational thing, like, okay, now we just got to all cooperate with each other. But it actually means we have a genuine appreciation for each other, and we're naturally seeing the good in each other, and therefore we naturally want to work together. And so I think the great opportunity that all of you have here is to develop a habitat and a sangha where you can allow each other to boast your confidence and then unleash an amazing potential to offer something to Krishna in this life. I guess I could say other things on this, but maybe I'll just kind of pause there for a moment and just see whether you guys have any questions on confidence or on taking a risk for Krishna or unleashing your potential or kind of mapping your journey forward in terms of what you want to achieve in service to Krishna and what blocks there may be along that journey. So, yes.
Maharaj, to the last point that you said about as a community we should be more encouraging, which is something me and my friend were talking about a few days ago, that because we live in a community, it's so important for us to be more encouraging towards each and every one. But I think the explanation, what I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the explanation why it doesn't happen a lot of times is because we ourselves are not showing up vulnerably to the other person. So we're not vulnerable, we try to cover up our flaws. So we don't think of the other person, we're consciously being mindful of how we are coming across, and I hope I'm not showing my flaws to the other person. And because we are not vulnerable, but the reason for that is there's a constant sense of judgment, judging others and judging ourselves. So how do we go beyond, how can we be just vulnerable? Because if I see someone else is vulnerable, it gives me confidence to be like, oh, I can admit I also did something wrong, or I need help with something.
Yeah.
So I think that vulnerability is such a jewel that it is so awesome. You can just be vulnerable and that makes you confident, which also I think is related to being your own confidant. Yeah. I often think confidence comes from being your confidant, with yourself and just be, somebody else who you can reach out to. So I don't know, I'm putting a lot of thoughts out there, I'm sorry.
No, it's a great point. Yeah, honesty and the ability to be very real in your relationships, that is actually the saving grace in Kali Yuga. We hear that there are 4 pillars on which society stands, and in Kali Yuga it's only resting on one, which is truthfulness. And I thought a lot about that. What does that mean, that only truthfulness is existing? And one of the perspectives I have on that is that even though our cleanliness, our mercy, our austerity and all other qualities may be lost, if we're able to be truthful, then everything else can be recreated through that honesty. And in that sense, although Kali Yuga is such an age in which everything is degraded, the one saving grace is the freedom to be truthful. Sometimes we tell people that, there are 4 defects of the conditioned soul. We have imperfect senses. But to be honest, you can't do much about that. Therefore, we'll be under illusion sometimes. To be honest, can't do much about that. It's just a very powerful energy. Therefore, sometimes you'll make mistakes. Can't do much about that. To err is human. But then, cheating. On that point, you can do something. Because yes, you may make mistakes, but can we be honest? Can we be open? Can we be vulnerable? And so I think, again, it's creating that sangha in which people don't fear they'll be judged. Because it's amazing. It's like now when you kind of travel as a kind of someone coming through different yatras, then naturally people open up to you. And it's amazing. Everyone's going through the same thing. There's like 100 people here and they're all going through the same thing. But they'll only speak to this one person here. Because I'm not going to tell these guys, because it's probably only me, And so we need to create that open sangha, and I think, and then it's a beautiful point. Through that will come the ability to empower each other and be confident. Yeah.
We just need to be more real.
Needs to be more real, yeah, definitely. Yes, Prabhu.
Maharaj, I was wondering if you have any practical tips, circling back on her point, because I think that there's a big benefit in having a sangha, because yes, you can connect and empower each other, but sometimes being vulnerable in a community, it could be something that could be used against you. You could be seen through that lens. So this person has this problem, so we're not going to trust him to do this. So how do you change the culture? When it's like so ingrained, how do you move past that?
Yeah. I think it begins with finding a devotee. It's not like, first just find someone who you can share with, who that will be free of that judgment, free of that potentiality for other complexities coming from my honesty. And then what will naturally happen is that when there are more and more relationships like that, then naturally there will be more and more understanding amongst the whole community of devotees. And then what happens is culture changes. To change culture takes time, and perhaps our movement has also gone through different phases, and in every phase there's strengths and there's weaknesses. And therefore sometimes what happens is some of the weaknesses are still continuing on, maybe from previous phases of the movement. But so it takes time to change that. But at least we can begin on an individual level. And the more individual connections there are, I think it will create, a wider change. Is that, yeah. Yes.
Maharaj, so I had a question about the shloka. After hearing Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, I wanted to know how we can maintain hope in such a situation, because it's something that the loop that I find myself in sometimes is that when you have certain doubts, it chips away from your faith. And when you lose that faith and you hear something like this, on one hand you might think like, oh, the acharyas think that this is the worst place to be. And also on the other hand, if you don't have that 100% faith, 100% surrender doesn't come through, and then you hear stories of like Gajendra or Draupadi, until they raised both their hands, had full faith, Krishna didn't really come and help them. So how do you maintain hope in such a situation like this?
When you have doubts.
Yeah.
What I generally say when there are doubts is approach it in 3 ways. Number 1, discuss. Like we're talking about, be honest. If you have doubts, then just discuss that. Second thing is, I say downplay. Certain doubts are not so important. Certain doubts are there, but they're not affecting your life right now. They're not like, so crucial that you have to resolve them now. So downplay. Don't give them more prominence than they need to have. like someone may read something in the Bhagavatam, like, I don't know, there's an ocean of liquor or something, and it might be like a doubt. But it's not so big that it has to like stop my Krishna consciousness now, It's just like, okay, we'll just put that to one side for now. And, so certain doubts can just be downplayed. And what I say is other doubts can just be delayed. Like we sit with the doubt. See, one thing we're not trained at doing in this world is being able to just sit with doubts. When we get a doubt, we're like, oh my God, something's got to give here. Like, I got to resolve it or I leave. But it's okay. Let doubts be there. Delay them. Understand that some doubts just get resolved and repaired in time. And therefore, this kind of method helped me to deal with doubts. What gives me hope, I was kind of mentioning also this morning, is just Vaishnav Sangha. Like, try to really connect deeply with someone who's connecting deeply. And in that, I feel like what we really look for in Krishna consciousness is actually living theology. We look for people who are actually living this. And over the years, that's what I've always tried to do. I always travel the world and I try to find people who I can connect with, who I can deeply identify as a living theology. And that helps me to get the faith that it works. Because sometimes just the intellectual conviction that it works isn't enough. We need to see it in someone. So I think these things can help to maintain our hope, even amidst doubts being there. So that can help.
How is confidence and enthusiasm in spiritual life developed when you don't have such an empowering Sangha?
So if one doesn't have that empowering Sangha where they feel they're drawing that, then how can they generate enthusiasm and confidence? Of course, our own spiritual practice is also a great source of enthusiasm and confidence. But of course, that spiritual practice has to be of a certain quality. And so, therefore, we often talk about the need for Sangha, because when we're lacking in that quality of practice, then the Sangha helps to bolster us even though we're not. But if you practice deeply, if you practice with sincerity and absorption and with a real attention to quality, then in that practice will be experience, will be revelation, will be a sense of divine connection. And so if we're sincerely seeking association, but we feel as though it's not coming, then what we do is we surrender to the name. We surrender to the process more and more, praying for that association and taking shelter there. Of course, we can always avail of the association of the great acharyas. We go back to our great teachers, their life example. When we read Srila Prabhupada's books, we're associating with him. We're associating with all the great predecessors who he's brought into our lives through his commentaries. And so that is also a great source of confidence and enthusiasm, connecting with the great saints of the past. We can pray. Sometimes I feel like prayer is an underrated aspect in our movement, We do a lot of chanting, we do a lot of kirtan and reading, but you can also pray, Recently I was in one Maharaj's room in Sweden, and he has all these books of like Christian monastics. And they were deeply thoughtful people, deeply prayerful. And they were finding divine communion through really revealing their heart to God. So we can try to also do that. Journal. Increase your inner dialogue. So there are many sources of inspiration, many sources of enthusiasm and confidence. Ultimately, we have to have a desire, and then Krishna will direct. And surely He'll bring Vaishnavas into your life if you deeply desire it. Yeah. Hope that helps. Yes.
Your point on prayer, I was actually thinking about this earlier this year as well. I feel like when I was younger in the 15 and under group, prayer used to be a lot more spontaneous. It used to be a lot more innocent. I felt Krishna is genuinely there. I have somebody to talk to. Prayer was a little bit more natural. And as I've sort of grown older, I feel like my heart has sort of hardened. There's also other understandings of what is to happen in my destiny will happen. This is the way that my life is going to go. It's going to go this way because Krishna has. I have certain karmic bonds. I have certain Krishna sort of written my fate and my path, at least somewhat outside of free will. And I feel like my prayer has become less. I've started praying less and less as I've sort of grown older. And I've just accepted things as they come. And even when there is prayer, it's a lot from, as we were talking about earlier today, that asha level. When maybe there's something I want, so I'll think about Krishna and request it. But there's not a lot of desire to just,
talk to Krishna.
And I feel like that kind of talking to Krishna it was something when it was there when I had that innocence, but now as I've gotten older, it's honestly gone away. So I guess how have you sort of, did you experience?
You have to rediscover your inner child. Yeah, that's what it is. It is like that actually. Like in the Christian tradition, it says you have to become innocent like a child to enter the kingdom of God. So there's a certain innocence that we have, not just in young age, but even in early years of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes I think about the early years of joining the Hare Krishna movement and I pray to Krishna, like, how can I rediscover that sincerity, that innocence, along with all the maturity that I've picked up along the way? Can I have like both, Krishna? And I often talk about this. One thing, and I've kind of mentioned it, that really helps me is journaling. Because I find that constant dialogue, that constant searching, that constant clarifying of your thoughts, that constant exploration of the inner world helps one to be more prayerful, be more conscious, be more naturally discursive with divinity. So that's definitely helped me. But I guess different devotees do it in different ways, Some devotees I know I was with one devotee recently, and he told me that he spends 45 minutes every day reciting a series of prayers. And some of them are his own prayers, some of them are prayers from the acharyas or from Shastra. So I guess we all do it in different ways, but to try to enter, there's a book like that, Conversations with God, to try to enter into a real dialogue. That's really what fascinated me when I joined the Hare Krishna movement, because devotees would be like, oh, Krishna's playing a trick on us. Like, oh, Krishna's teaching us a lesson. And for me, this was mind-blowing. Because I never thought of divinity or God as someone who's so active in my life. And these guys were just talking about it like it was, Joe Public or something, like, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And I thought, wow, that's so amazing to be in communion with divinity, to see that divine hand. So one has to become very thoughtful. Srila Prabhupada writes in one purport, a devotee should be as introspective as a non-devotee is speculative. So to really develop that, you have to be very deep. And actually, as time goes by in Krishna consciousness, you desire that more. After some time in Krishna consciousness, the external things, it just doesn't doesn't move you anymore. We want to get something deeper, we want to experience something deeper, we want to find a deeper connection. So this is all a good challenge for us, you know. Yeah.
Maharaj, are there any practical tips that you could give on how we can increase our self-confidence, or is there like a specific personal path that a person takes on to overcome their low self-confidence?
Yeah, so how do we overcome or develop more confidence? I think for me, one thing that's always helped is reflecting back on my life and seeing how Krishna has always helped. When I've taken a risk, when I've made an endeavor, when we feel that yes, there'll always be divine backup, Krishna will always help on this journey, Krishna will preserve what I have and he'll carry what I lack. When we reflect back in our lives and we see those situations and we appreciate them, then it helps us to go forward and do more and be more confident. I guess there could be many other things that help you to become more confident. Of course, we've talked here a lot about Sangha and how like encouraging people in your life. They say the greatest gift you can have in your life is someone who has more faith in you than you have in yourself. So if you ever find someone like that, His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he defined the spiritual master as that person who can provide you with a vision for your life that's much greater than what you could have come up with yourself. So if you have someone in your life like that who's always able to expand your vision, expand your horizon, that's hugely hope-giving and confidence-giving. I was just in Stanford, we were just at Stanford University, and we were remembering Bhakta Steve Jobs. And he talked about death. He said death is life's greatest change agent. So for him it was like meditating that you're going to die. In that fear, in overcoming that fear, you get the confidence to do everything else, because you just think like, okay. And I know that may sound very transcendental, but sometimes it is like that. We remember that, yeah, ultimately we have got this opportunity, we've got this time, seize the day, do it. You know, Mark Twain, he says 20 years from now, what you'll regret more is not what you did, but what you didn't do. Which kind of rings true for a lot of us, you know, that we'll probably regret what we didn't do more than what we did do. It's funny, there's this notion in life that doing something is risky and not doing something is the safe option. By default, we seem to have this psychology that acting is risky and not acting is safe. But that's actually a complete lie. Doing something is risky and not doing something is just as risky. Isn't it? You agree? You know, like, imagine you're in quicksand, you know, and then you say like, oh, maybe I can escape that way, but there's some crocodiles there, man. Maybe I can go this way, but you know, no, there's a cliff there. Maybe I can go this way, but there's dacoits. No. Maybe I could go back, but no, there's a storm coming. Anyway, I'll take the safe option. I'll just stay here. Well, my friend, you're going to die anyway. So we need to, it's all a risk, everything's a risk. When I took sannyas, someone came and he said, that's a big risk. I said, yeah. And then I looked at him and I said, marriage? What do you think? Risky? He said, yeah, risky. Whatever you do, cross the road, it's just all a risk, you know, everything's a risk. So it's all about reframing. Bravery is such a beautiful quality. Abhay Charanada Vindam, fearless, having taken shelter at Krishna's lotus feet. So to be brave, I never thought myself to be a brave person. I still don't. But somehow, it's amazing. As you go on this journey, if we want to, Krishna gives us a lot of strength to do things. And so that's why I raised this point today, because I feel like it's just that confidence which, if everyone can bolster within themselves, it's going to unleash so much potential. So yeah, those are some thoughts.
So I had a question. I feel like, and with context, but I feel like with a lot of us, if I can speak for some of us, that a lot of us are in school or at work, and we kind of have to find that balance within our own bhakti, and like finding the balance between being able to finish your 16, doing your gayatris, whatever it might be, and following that at the exact times of like doing it in the morning, doing your 6, 12, 6, whatever that might be. And I feel like sometimes there's days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to approach my bhakti with guilt that I'm not following those exact times, but like being able to see that I am being balanced and ambitious, that I'm progressing in both spiritual and material and all those things. And I guess the question is kind of, how do we approach our bhakti from more of a place of love? Like, I'm trying my best, and it might not be my most quality, but I am trying my best to call out to Krishna and serve him, instead of from a place of guilt that it's not happening in the exact, like, Shastric way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all go through this. Of course, we know Krishna says that I only look for love and devotion, and I only look for the best endeavor, and that bhava grahi janardana, I'm grasping the sincerity of your attempt, you know. There's a story of a brahmana who would chant his gayatris like on the sandhyam, like every single time. And then at one point he had overslept and he was going to miss the afternoon sandhyam. So the personification of Kali appeared and woke him up and said, "You're going to miss your Gayatri, chant your Gayatri." So he quickly was like, "Oh God, I'm going to..." So he started doing his Gayatri, and then he finished and he was like, "But you are the personification of Kali. Why did you remind me to do my religious duty?" And then Kali said to him, he said, "Look, you've been doing your Gayatris on time for years and you think you're doing good. But if you had actually missed one, you would have become a little repentant and you would have become a little humble. And in that humility, you might have actually developed some sincerity. And therefore, I can't let you become sincere. Therefore, I wanted you to just be perfect. The illusion of perfection. Sometimes our weakness can become our biggest strength if that weakness brings about humility. And amazingly, sometimes your strength can become your biggest weakness if it brings about pride. And the example is Indra. So if we're austere, if we're learned, if we're like on the spot, that, you know, I also saw that we lived in the ashram, you know, and it was always like naturally competition, comparison, and you kind of like, it's so easy to judge others like, oh yeah, he missed Mangalarti again. Maybe in the next life he'll be as regulated as me. So it's so easy to allow our strength. So like that, you know, when we fall short, we approach Krishna. I think you just have to be real with Krishna, have a conversation with Krishna. Krishna is a nice guy. He's not a religious fanatic. And he knows you're trying your best. And you know what? When you're trying your best, you'll go to bed at night satisfied. Because no one needs to tell you, you know I tried my best. I was like, Krishna, I couldn't do any more. Like, I'm trying here. But whenever there's that sense that I had a little bit more in the tank, but I didn't give it, then there's always the doubt. So we just have to try. Right? Some thoughts.
What you're talking about, little more in the tank, when it accumulates day after day after day, then that guilt builds up again.
That I'm holding something back. Yeah. Don't hold back. Empty it out. Yeah, that's why it's nice. Certain times in the year you can just go and make a real endeavor. And then just try to really go all in, you know. I found marathons good like that. We used to go on book distribution marathons, and it was like, in those moments you would try to just give everything. And then sometimes when you just have experiences where you try to just give everything, like I said, if you create a sangha or something happening where everyone just gives everything, that also creates a deep impression, because you realize, wow, when I just give to Krishna, it's so amazing. So we also need to feel that power of being completely selfless. What does that experience feel like? I don't know how we're doing for time. Are we good? We're good for time? Okay. I don't know how you guys are doing for time. Are you good? 10 minutes? Okay. Yeah, and also someone can make a comment if they like on any of these points. It's not like, it's very relaxed.
I had a question, Maharaj. You were talking about like the gas emptying the tank, or we had a little more in the tank. But sometimes, like I can convince myself, at least speak for myself, that I've done everything I can. But it's really easy to get convinced that I've done everything I can. But how do we know that we're not doing, like, we don't want to do too much that we get burned out? But how do we know that we're ready to do more and actually, like, convince ourselves that we're ready to do, a little bit more, be a little more strict with ourselves because we have the capacity.
Yeah.
Like not over assess or under assess where we are.
Yeah. Of course, again, it comes, like we talked about that a lot today, like Sangha, like when you go to a gym, it's like you can't just expect to be lifting like, 100 pencils or something and then, develop muscles, At the same time, you can't do 100 kg, So it's like, so that guidance always helps. But generally, as time goes by, we have to be doing more. And the more doesn't mean just quantity, it can mean quality, it can be more in responsibility, but it has to be increased. It's like what you did 2 years ago in your spiritual practice, chances are it's not enough anymore. It's just not enough because you've grown as a devotee. Yeah, it's not enough anymore, you have to do more. But it's not just quantity, and it could be do more in different ways. So as long as we're increasing like that, then I think we know we're going in the right direction. And again, there's no replacement for sincerity. We'll know. We'll know that there's room for improvement.
Maharaj, what does it practically look like to have humility? Because in my experience, I've seen devotees have a very humble attitude, and they often get taken advantage of or manipulated because they're so humble.
Thank you. In Amritavani, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says, humility is the complete absence of the enjoying spirit. I find that quite a powerful definition. And if you turn that definition, what it means is that if humility is the complete absence of the enjoying spirit, humility is the complete presence of the service spirit. So for me, the most practical way in which I've tried to imbibe humility in my life is just to think about how in every situation I can be a servant. A servant means to empower, to invest, to uplift, to encourage, and to support others. And in every situation, how you do that and how you carry yourself, that you may have to adjust according to practical situations. But basically the most humble person is the one who's always thinking, how can I serve? And in a certain situation, there's no stereotyped way of serving. It depends according to the situation, how you're going to serve. But that bhav, that emotion that I should serve, that's the mindset of a humble person. And so humility is not just the external set of like stereotyped idiosyncrasies, or it's a deep desire within the heart to want to serve others. That means you're humble. And so I think sometimes that's a better way to focus on humility rather than to think of it in a very external way. Think about it in the very deep internal context of having unwavering seva bhav, or the attitude to want to serve.
So Maharaj, I was thinking, like we talk about humility, false ego, feeling burnt out. All of this stems from, like I think the root cause is the relationship we have with ourselves. We all have a relationship with ourselves. And then there's a relationship we have with Krishna. So is there a link that the deeper the relationship is with Krishna, that directly empowers the relationship we have with ourselves? Or is there a difference? Because if we have a relationship with ourselves, there's also Paramatma within. That if we're thinking through intelligence, not through mind, but through intelligence, and how do we know that is it actually impacting, like that what is the connection between the relationship with myself and with the relationship with Krishna?
It's interesting terminology, relationship with yourself. I'm trying to think if I've heard Srila Prabhupada explain it in those terms. Of course, we talk about self-awareness, self-realization. See, Srila Prabhupada explains that when the sun rises in the sky in the morning, then as soon as you see the sun, you see yourself. And in that way, he says that self-realization or self-awareness can only come about when one has God realization or connection with the divine. And in that sense, they're connected. That the more you know Krishna, the more you're connected with Krishna, then the more you're aware of yourself, you're aware of your own position, your own qualities, your own capacities, like that. And the more we're disconnected from Krishna, the more we are in darkness about our own place in this world. And so in that sense, I would say they're connected. That yes, divine connection naturally brings self-awareness.
The reason I'm asking is because we talk a lot about self-care these days. We talk about emotional wellness, devotee care, but if I have to understand someone else, I also need to have an understanding of myself. Because if I have to reach out to someone, like I feel there's a strong connection. And of course, maintaining that line where I'm not just thinking about me or just about self-absorbed, that's not the idea, but the idea is to, again, the confidence comes from the vulnerability, everything is I feel connected, and that relationship I feel is a very strong essence of the whole.
Yeah, we know definitely. We have to be self-aware. We have to know what our boundaries are. We're doctors, but we're patients as well. I was recently mentioning at one university that they did a study of the most compassionate people in the world to try to see what common trait they had. And the common trait amongst the most compassionate people in the world, it's almost counterintuitive, is that they all created boundaries in their life. And you think like, compassion, boundaries? I thought like the most compassionate people are just boundless. But no, they create a certain boundary to invest in themselves, from which space they can come out and give more. You can't take the world to a higher place than what you've reached internally yourself. And so yes, we have to be very self-aware.
I think that self-love also comes from strengthening your sadhana, because you're caring for yourself, which means you're strengthening your spiritual assets like your sadhana, your services. Probably that link can happen, right? Because you're feeding yourself, feeding your soul.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, you mentioned this word self-love. It's funny, we had a 3-hour discussion on this, like, do we believe in self-love? I won't get into the details of it. I don't think we came to a conclusion, because different acharya, it is actually there. There's a terminology where actually I think it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says like, I love Krishna, I love the Vaishnavas, I love the name, and I love myself because I'm a servant, or he says something like that. But generally when you think of love, you think of it as something to be expressed in relationship to someone or something else other than us. But it's interesting. But anyway, that's just a side point.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, so as you were talking about how in a community being vulnerable to each other and really being the real us. So one thing is when there is somebody who comes to me and talks about their problems, I feel I can give them a solution or something, or even hear them out and be empathetic when I can relate to them. Maybe they are going through the same problems that I went through or that I'm going through, or something that I can relate on. But there are many people who come up and talk to me, but I've never faced such a situation in my life, so I can't even relate or tell them what to do or how
do you
to
help them?
console them. So what would you suggest?
First thing is, oftentimes we put ourselves under pressure when we're hearing someone that, okay, now I've got to come out with like the most groundbreaking, profound, earth-shattering, life paradigm-shifting advice which is going to solve their problems. And actually sometimes they just want you to hear them. I think the first thing is just hear. They say the kindest gift you can give to someone is your own attention. So just in that hearing, a lot is done. Isn't it like even Krishna in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, he just like hears Arjun. And then Arjun's like, can you be my guru? And then according to the in-between reading of the acharyas, Krishna's like, no, you don't need me to be your guru. It's like, you're right, you know. It's like, no, I want you. So like, just hear. I think that's one thing. That's already a huge thing. Because in people's lives, they were not heard. When you're a kid, your parents don't hear you. When you're a teenager, your teachers don't hear you. When you go to work, your boss doesn't hear you. When you get married, your partner doesn't hear you. And when you become a parent, your kids don't hear you. And when you become old, nobody hears you. So for most of our life, people are not hearing us. And therefore, if you lend someone your ears, in that is already. Second thing is, you can always guide people to places. You don't have to have all the answers. Even in the third canto, no? Like Uddhava, Vidura and Uddhava having a conversation, and then Uddhava says, no, you go, listen from Maitreya, don't listen. He took him somewhere else. So you can also signpost. You don't have to have all the answers. You can signpost people, help them. Another thing in the world is that sometimes to help people, you don't have to give them answers, but you just need to ask the right questions which help them to find the answers. Isn't it? So that's what coaching is all about. You know, like we don't have to put the pressure, just help them to understand themselves better. And so like that, yeah. Like we don't need to be the person who has all the answers, but we just need to be there for people. People don't care how much you know, really what they want to know how much you care. That's the real thing. So I see many, one more? Okay.
So Maharaj, I want to have a clear understanding about the confidence in bhakti, because as we know ourselves, that we know that we are particularly good at cooking, somebody is particularly good at public speaking, or somebody is good at singing kirtan. So confidence shakes when we are like going beyond our capabilities. So is it really required to build up our confidence where we don't think ourselves is capable of doing something? Like, is it really required to go that way? Or should we stay in our comfort zone and have our full confidence and do our best to serve our Srila Prabhupada, our Guru, and Krishna, make them happy? Because sometimes when we like go beyond our capability, it gives us a lot of anxiety, a lot of nervousness, and by which instead of focusing on bhakti, we focus on building our self-confidence, thinking about our disqualification, this and that.
Okay.
So that's my question.
Well, the first point is sometimes we don't know our capability. We've convinced ourselves, I don't have that capability. But how do you know? Maybe you do. I also never thought, when I joined the movement, they said, you have to give classes. I said, no, I don't. No, they said, no, this is what everyone does usually. I said, no, not me. And over time, Krishna gave some intelligence, how to do that. So sometimes we have capabilities we don't know about. It comes out in time, it comes out with endeavor, it comes out with blessing, it comes out with desire. Bhakti-tirtha Maharaj, he says, when your desire to serve is so strong that you go beyond your capacity, but you continue on without hesitation, at that moment empowerment occurs. So unless we're willing to a little bit venture into the unknown, we may not discover what capabilities Krishna has for us, because we're constantly limiting ourselves by our own confined vision. This is who I am, this is what I can do, and that's what my life is meant for. Okay, but maybe there's more. So I would say, don't shy away from challenging what you think your capabilities are. But when it's clear that Krishna has not, doesn't want you to do a certain thing, or that's not your dharma, that's not what you're meant to be doing in this life, then yes, then we accept it without any hard feelings, and we say, yeah, I should do what is in line with my dharma. But that whole process is discovery. So sometimes we just sell ourselves short because we don't even try. Does that make sense? So there may be, maybe there are. Maybe you don't think you're a singer, but maybe you are. Maybe. But you have to try. And then continually, if it doesn't seem to be the thing, then I tried. Obviously Krishna doesn't want me. Let's try something else then. All right, thank you so much for your time and patience.